Great, yes, welcome everyone. Very, very nice to see you all, and welcome to those of you that are joining us online as well. So we're starting a new series this evening. You might have noticed when you walked in the figure on the shrine here. Does anybody recognise him? Other than the team? Anyone know who he is? Okay, so he's called Milarepa. Milarepa means the cotton-clad one. And you might see that he's just wearing a thin cotton robe. And he is a Tibetan kind of guru, teacher, yogi from the 11th century. And we're going to be doing a series on him for the next 6 weeks. And we're going to be basing it on this book called The Yogi's Joy, which is about the songs of Milarepa. Now, often when you see Milarepa, as in this picture, he's holding a hand to his ear. And one of the ways that he communicated was through song and through poetry. He would just spontaneously kind of, break into song, break into poetry. And it was like he was sort of brimming over with the energy and vitality of spiritual practice. And he would just sort of, these songs would issue forth from him. And we're going to be looking at some of those and some stories from his life, from when he... so it's said that he was an enlightened teacher, basically. So he was fully and perfectly enlightened. And he had many students throughout his life, and he taught many people. But he didn't start off that way. He started off in very, very difficult and challenging circumstances. And we'll be hearing tonight about how he became this, basically, and his path from a very difficult, very challenging start in life to being well on the way to becoming an enlightened teacher. That's what we're going to talk a little bit about this evening. That's what I'm going to talk about a little bit this evening. So I'll say a little bit more about that as the evening goes on. But let's start with a period of meditation. So if you want to get into your meditation posture... Okay, so yeah, as I said, we're starting a new series on Milarepa, and I'm going to talk a little bit about his early life this evening, which was, it's quite a story, basically, his early life. Now, Milarepa was alive from the 11th to the 12th century in Tibet, so sort of medieval times in Tibet. So, he, as far as we know, he was a real person. And his life is sort of semi-mythic. He's of that time where he's like long enough ago that we don't really know what's sort of fact and fiction. So some of it is sort of metaphor, and some of it's poetry, and some of it's imagery. But I think in a way you don't really need to worry about that. I think you just need to listen to the story. And what we'll be doing this evening is kind of drawing out why would we want to know his story? What's he got to tell us all these years later in London? So it's sort of semi-mythic, and some of it's even a bit fantastical. But I'll just tell you what the story is, basically. So, are you all sitting comfortably? You can reply if you like. Yes, great. Okay, then I will begin. Okay. So, Milarepa wasn't always Milarepa. When he was a young, so he was christened Tapaga, and that means delightful to hear. So what a lovely name. He was christened Tapaga, which means delightful to hear. And he had a sister, and they lived in a kind of quite remote rural region of Tibet. So you can imagine life was quite hard. You know, they lived in the mountains. It would have been snowy. It would have been cold. He had a sister, Peta. It was him and his sister, and they lived, their family was relatively well off. So he had a mother and father, and the father was a very hard-working wool merchant, and he managed to build up this business. And relative to 11th century Tibet, they were quite affluent. They had a nice house, they had enough food, and so on. So he had quite a comfortable early childhood, but then... when Tapaga was age 7 years old, tragedy struck. So his father got very, very ill, and then he got seriously ill, and it became clear that his father wasn't going to make it, basically. So his father gathered all the family around his deathbed and asked his brother to take care of Tapaga and the rest of the family. And his brother, Tapaga's uncle, promised that he would do that, basically. So he promised that he would take care of the family. So it was a very, very difficult situation. Your father dies when you're very young, but it looked like everything was going to be okay because there were family around, there was an uncle around, and they were going to take care of the family. Unfortunately, things didn't work out that way. So his father did die, and his uncle completely reneged on his promise. So as soon as his father had died, he started treating Milarepa I'll just keep calling him Milarepa because I get mixed up between Milarepa and Tapaga. But anyway, the young Tapaga, or Milarepa to be, he started treating his family very, very badly. He refused to honor his promise, and he basically turned his family into like domestic servants. They used to shout at them, they used to beat them. It's said in Milarepa's biography that they treated them like dogs, or sometimes worse than dogs. So they only had rags to wear, and they were given like just scraps of food, and they were set to work on their uncle's farm and treated really, really badly. They were starving at times, and life went from being very, very comfortable to really, really bad in quite a short space of time. I don't know, can you imagine that? Sometimes it's like we go along, life's happening, and we just assume that things are going to carry on as they are, don't we? And then something happens, and it has a big effect. And in this case, it had a really, really adverse effect on Milarepa. So, as I said, they were only given scraps of food to eat. They were treated very, very badly. And obviously, the mother was really, really upset about this. So Milarepa's mum was beside herself with anger. Because, as a woman in medieval Tibet, she would have had no rights over her property. So her husband, had this big house, but the uncle's taken it over. She's got no rights. She just has to stand there and take it, basically. So what the mother does is she organizes a feast she has a little bit of jewelry left, which she sells, and she organizes a feast for all of the villagers. And she petitions the villagers at this feast and says, look what's happened. Look what this man has done to us. He promised that he would look after us, and he's completely reneged on his promises. But unfortunately, the villagers don't side with her because the uncle's a very, very powerful man. And the uncle and his wife humiliate them, basically. They humiliate the family, and they tell lies. So they say, no, your husband never asked us to look after you. And in fact, all of this wealth, it was ours anyway. He only borrowed it from us, or he stole it from us. So not only does he not keep his promise, he tells lies, and he's acting like that property was his all along. So this really, really incenses Milarepa's mum. She's absolutely beside herself. And she decides that she wants revenge on the uncle. So she sends Milarepa off to learn black magic, basically, to learn what they call the black arts. Does anyone know anything about the occult or black magic or anything like that? Okay, one person. So I can probably wing it a bit this evening then, because I don't really know anything about it at all. But basically it says in his biography that he goes off to learn the black arts. And he learns this from a teacher. And the reason why his mum wants him to do that is she wants to exact her revenge. And she says that it's Milarepa's duty. By this time, I think he's about 16 or 17. And she says, look, it's your duty to avenge our family. You're the next in line. You're your father's son. Are you just going to stand around and see us treated like this? Or are you going to go off and learn black magic? Which, funny enough, is what my mother said to me when I left home. No, she didn't really. So anyway, Milarepa goes off to learn the black arts. And apparently he's very, very bright and very adept. and he kind of excels at this, basically. So he finds a teacher, and his mother manages to find a little bit more jewelry from somewhere, and he takes, as is traditional, he takes an offering to the teacher, and he arrives with, he goes into this village, and there's like an inn in the village, and he meets some other students that are going off to this black magic teacher. And over a period of months, the other students slowly leave because they're finding it too difficult and too arduous. But Milarepa stays, and he becomes the teacher's most outstanding student. And within about a year or so, he has learned all of these techniques, and basically he can go back and sort of avenge his family, which is what he does. He meets his mother again, and his mother says, look, you've got to do something. So he casts a spell, and in this spell, a giant scorpion comes and attacks the central pole of his uncle's house. They've got this huge house, and this giant scorpion, has anyone seen a scorpion in real life? They're quite fearsome creatures, aren't they? Weirdly enough, you get them at the men's ordination retreat center in Spain, where we have our ordination retreats. You get scorpions, and you have to be very, very careful, because they like to crawl into your shoes. And if you're not careful, you put your shoe on and you can get stung by a scorpion, which can kill you. Anyway, that's by the by. And it's the white scorpions that are more dangerous than the black scorpions, apparently, but maybe not in Tibet, because it's this huge black scorpion that attacks the central foundation pole thing of his uncle's house. And it's while there is a wedding going on. So there's lots and lots of people there. And the house collapses, and it kills about 30 people, more than 30 people. So suddenly, Milarepa is responsible for the death of all these villagers. So he's just a young man, and goodness me, what a situation to be in. So he is absolutely, well, I don't know how he feels, it doesn't say, but you can imagine this is quite a shock for him. But his mother's response is one of absolute delight. So I'll read you what his mother says about it. She says, "What a cheering sight hath my son brought before my eyes to bless my old age. Delighted I am to have lived to enjoy such a scene. Could any other moment of my life be the equal of this in perfect triumphant joy?" Gosh, she sounds like quite a piece of work, doesn't she? She's delighted, basically, that all these people have died and that he's avenged her. But I think for Milarepa, it's a little bit more... it's not as straightforward as that, because he's committed this crime and he's terrified. And what happens is he gets wind of the fact that the villagers... so there's all these people that have died, but then, of course, there's all these people in the villages around as well, and they get wind of the mother's reaction, because she's running around shouting and shouting about how brilliant it is and how it's the happiest day of her life and all of that sort of thing. And they feel like, oh, she's gone too far this time. Like, this is too much. Okay, she's been wronged, but this won't do. So they decide that they're going to get their revenge on the mother, but they also know that Milarepa is now this black magician. So they decide that they're going to have to go after him first, basically, and then they'll get the mother after that. So Milarepa goes into hiding, and he's hiding in this cave. And a friend of his that he knows from, I was going to say from the black magic course, it's not quite like that. So like something you do at City Lit or something like that. But from his studies as a black magician, he's got this friend, and they're hiding in the cave together. And he says to him, look, they're going to come and kill you, basically. So you need to run away, and I'll like hold them off. So he does this. And then he manages to make contact with his mum one more time, and she persuades him that he has to do one final thing, which is to warn the villagers off. So he casts this spell for hailstorms to ruin their harvest. because they've got this incredible bountiful harvest that year, and they're getting ready to harvest all their crops and so on, and they're absolutely delighted about this. And Milarepa conjures up all these hailstorms, which completely ruins the crop. Now, that might not sound like very much to all of us, because we're not from an agriculture, well, maybe you are, but I'm not from an agricultural community. But I know, I work in India some of the time with my sort of day job, so to speak, and I know that a ruined crop is actually terrible. Like, people can starve with that. So he's wreaked havoc on the villagers again, and they're really, really, really upset with it. And he runs away, basically, and he's completely filled with remorse. He makes off, he hides in the mountains, and he has some time, and he just sits down and he's like, oh my goodness, like what have I done? I've gone from being this young man to being responsible for the deaths of all these people and being responsible for the ruination of their crops. What on earth have I done, and what am I going to do? So this is the first part of the story, and I'm going to tell you another part of the story after the tea break, but I'd like us to chew over that a little bit, just what I've told you so far. Now, one of the things about this story is, when we tell stories at the Buddhist Center and we tell myths and parables and that sort of thing, it's partly so that we can listen to those stories and think, well, what does this have to do with us? What does this tell us about our own lives? One of the things I like about this story is how relatable it is. Who can honestly say among us that we haven't summoned up a giant scorpion and killed 30 wedding guests as a result? So on that level, it's a bit of an imaginal leap, isn't it? But if we take it as a sort of a myth or a metaphor or something like that, I'd like to ask you, what do you make of this story, and what do you think it has to do with you, or does it say anything about your own life? This is Milarepa's situation before he comes to the Dharma. So this is before he starts trying to practice Buddhism. This is what's happened to him, basically, and this is the point that he's at the moment. And I'd like you to get into pairs and just explore that a little bit. What do you think? What on earth, and what does this have to do with us? Okay, so let's get into pairs, and we'll have a little bit of time to talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm very interested in what you were talking about. So would anyone like to share anything? Yeah, go on, David. Yeah.
Well, I've kind of, on the men's 9-day intensive retreat, we got to talk about Milarepa every night. So
yeah.
I know how it ends.
Yeah. He gets enlightened, that's a spoiler.
I think if he was around in Bethnal Green now, he'd be sectioned under the Mental Health Act.
It's possible.
With eating nettles and turning green, people would think that he's harming his own health. But the discussion we had was about how we've all got this ability to feel hatred towards people.
Mm.
A lot of times it's based on fear too.
Mm.
It's a very easy emotion to have. And we were talking about how we channel that towards politicians that we don't like, and feel a level of bitterness towards them, rather than trying to understand why they're like that and what the reasons for it are, and show compassion. But what sprung to mind for us was we were talking about people like Nelson Mandela, who was incarcerated for 35 years, but had this ability to just forgive the people who put him into prison and come out with so much compassion and love. So there is an opposite to this as well that's interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you very much, David. Yeah. Anyone else like to share, like what you thought or what you think, or? Yes.
So we've been discussing, like, it's quite interesting because your circumstances tell you how to feel and what to be.
Okay, yeah.
So maybe until he went to the mountain,
Yeah.
all of the circumstances told him who he is,
Right, okay.
how he needs,
Yeah.
what he needs to do,
Yeah.
and integrity of listening to mother,
Yeah.
you know, and all of
Yeah.
that. And then, well, at the same time, so basically you can understand him on that level.
Yeah.
No matter
Yeah.
what kind of person is, you can still learn to understand.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is like his mother, like man was in charge of the house and all of that,
Yeah.
like it's a different age. You can kind of understand what kind of circumstances,
Yeah.
what's like basically she been told
Yeah.
who she needs to be.
Yes.
It's not like everybody's free
No.
to do the right thing.
That's right.
So that's like things that,
Yeah.
that we were discussing.
There's a couple of very good points in there, isn't there? So it's something to do with him and his circumstances and how he behaved as a result of that, and the pressure that that put on him. You used the language of telling him how to be, which I guess you're also meaning how, you know, as an extension of that, how he acted.
Yeah.
And there's also his relationship with his mother, that he wanted, in a sense, to do the right thing by him, in inverted commas.
And then if you look at his mother,
Yeah.
and she might be like cheering that
Yes.
30 people died,
Yeah.
but it's unknown
Yeah.
who, what are those 30 people, what kind of place she is, what kind of woman she is,
Right.
how much like decision she has
Mm.
in life, you know,
Mm.
like in it's different days, so
Yeah.
you can kind of get like some sort of fragments of understanding
Yeah.
them through their circumstances.
That's right. So there's a lot to do with circumstances and conditions, isn't there? And which way conditions can lead us as well. So yeah. So I mean that I think that's all very interesting. Do you get the sense of him as like a bad person or a sort of an evil person, or no? Go on. Yeah.
To be honest, like I completely understand why he did what he did, and in some sense, it's almost like I don't know if you've ever been in like an abusive situation, but you'd probably do something similar. But he probably could have been more subtle about it. Like if he could, like,
Just maybe like a small scorpion or something.
Yeah, or like make his uncle slip on a banana peel or something.
Right. Yeah.
Or
That's
something.
right. That's right. Yeah. So it's an extreme story, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing, is like, you know, when I read it, I just sort of read it as like it's not a tragedy actually, because the way it ends is very, very different. But it's like the first part of the story reads a bit like a tragedy. You know, it's this, he's going along in his childhood, something happens, and it's like the whole course of his life changes. And it's in a sense, you could say that, I don't know if you could say he's a victim of his circumstance, but he's certainly a product of his circumstances. And well, as we've said, basically, yeah. You were going to say something.
I was just going to say that I agree with all that, and we were having a really good discussion about conditioning and all the rest of it. But I suppose one sort of lesson I was getting from it was that, you know, the consequences of acting on ill will, essentially, because this scorpion did kill 30 people.
Yeah.
As far as we're concerned, they were innocent people.
Yeah.
And then as a next step to ward these people off two people, but then he destroys a whole harvest. So you know, I do completely agree with this point of conditioning, and I'm also not saying this person is evil at all. At the same time, maybe, as you say, just get a banana skin. Take out the
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I'm not saying that one is right and one is wrong. That's the thing. I think it's just it's hard to tell how much of this is true and how much of it's myth. But I think what's interesting is to take it from the point of view of what can this tell us, you know, and you know, that I think I agree with what you've said. Basically, it's Go on.
I think it makes a good point about how things can quite quickly spiral out of control
Yeah.
when you're on the wrong path.
Yeah.
Though, because, you know,
Yeah.
to try and then get away from the first
That's
thing
right.
that he regretted doing, he
That's
then
right.
did something else
That's
bad,
right.
and life
That's
can
right.
be like that.
That's right, exactly. So that's the thing, isn't it? Is the Buddha, you know, the Buddha's central teaching, it's not the most basic teaching, the Buddha's central teaching is on conditionality. You put certain conditions into play and then they beget other conditions, and this is what's happened here. What I was going to say to you actually is that it puts me in mind of the Buddha's saying about hatred never being stilled by hatred. You know, it's a very, very good illustration of that, isn't it? It's like that situation is not going to be resolved satisfactorily by just piling on like reaction to reaction to reaction to hatred to hatred to hatred, and it kind of spirals out of control, as you said. Basically, there's certain conditions come into play, and the situation spirals out of control. I was thinking as well. I mean, I haven't really thought about this very much, but I have reflected on it a bit, and I was thinking the thing about black magic. Like, what is it really? And you could see it as a metaphor for trying to engineer and manipulate events in life. Like, he's basically tried really hard to sort of control things, hasn't he? You know, his mum's tried to get him to do this thing. And really what that is sort of exercising control over reality or something like that. And he arrives at the path with that having not worked at all. And I think whatever you say about him, the point is he's basically at the end of this very, very, very difficult series of events, but he's also at the start of something else. And you could say he's arriving at the path in a way, the way it was for you the first time you arrived at the Buddhist center. And you may not have summoned up giant scorpions, but presumably you've had some you've arrived here because there's something in life that is not going the way that you want, or it may be that you've arrived because of real difficulty or pain or suffering or difficulty. I mean, that was my situation when I arrived here. And when I talk to people, it's often the case as well. So I'm going to say more about that when we come back after tea. Let's stop now for a tea break. Great, yeah, so very, very good to see you all, and welcome again to those of you that are just joining us. So my name is Akashamitra, and we're starting a new series this evening. What we do in the main class is we run these kind of series of talks, basically over a period of like 4 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. And we're starting a new series this evening, and the series is on Milarepa, who his picture is on the shrine there, and he was an enlightened yogi, teacher, guru from the sort of 11th, 12th century in Tibet. And what we're looking at this evening is the story of how he became Milarepa, how he became an enlightened teacher, because his start in life was very, very difficult and very colourful and very challenging. And just before, in the first half this evening, I was telling the story of his life. So he, just briefly to say, he was born into quite a wealthy, comfortable family, and when his father died, his uncle basically cheated his family out of their inheritance, and they were sort of treated very, very badly by his uncle. He had he had a mother who was basically hell-bent on revenge, and when he came of age, Milarepa was sent away to learn black magic, and his mother insisted that he sort of wreak havoc and revenge on the uncle and all the villagers around, because they'd sort of failed to side with the family. So Milarepa learnt black magic, and he cast this spell where a huge black scorpion caused his uncle's house to collapse, killing 30 wedding guests. And not satisfied with that, he then decided that he could make himself safe by creating hailstorms and ruining the neighbours' crops. And I was saying before in the first half about how relatable that story is, and how I'm sure we can all relate to part of that. Who among us hasn't summoned up a giant scorpion at some point in their life? That was a joke. So where we find Milarepa, though, at this point is, well, how did he become Milarepa? How did he become an enlightened guru from such an inauspicious start? And I got people into pairs just before the tea break, and I was saying, well, what can that story tell us about our life? It's a very fantastical story, and it's a very extreme example, isn't it? But maybe it can tell us something about our life. And we were talking about the difficulty of conditions, sometimes how we're in certain situations, we act in certain ways, and that takes on a momentum, and before we know it, we're in a very, very difficult, very challenging situation. We were saying Milarepa doesn't seem like a bad person, but he was under the influence of people who wanted him to act in a certain way. But any way you slice it, he's in a very, very difficult situation now, and he's basically had to run away, and he's hiding out in a cave, and he knows. See, this is 11th century Tibet, where Buddhism was flourishing at the time. So he knows that his only chance is to go towards. Well, in his biography, it talks about the path of light. So it's like he's been on the path of darkness, and now he needs to find the path of light. So he knows that he needs to find a teacher. He had a teacher when he was learning black magic, but he needs to find another teacher who can help him to sort of undo all his negative karma, basically, who can help him to come to terms with what he's done, and maybe even help him to grow towards this path of light rather than this path of darkness. So there's a lovely moment in the story where he is looking for a teacher, and he hears the name of his who would become his guru, Marpa, and even just on hearing Marpa's name, something happens to him. So he experiences this kind of rapture, basically. So I'll read you a little bit from his biography. He says, on hearing the name Marpa the translator, my mind was filled with an inexpressible feeling of delight. A thrill went through my whole body, setting in motion every hair, while tears started from my eyes. So strong was the feeling of faith aroused in me. So even just on hearing Marpa's name, this is what happens. Maybe you can relate to that. I don't know. Like maybe those of you that have been on the intro course, on the Introduction to Buddhism and Meditation, when you came along and you just heard Sangadarin's name, it was like something happened, and it was just filled you with faith and confidence. I don't know. Maybe that happened. Maybe it didn't happen. But what we have there is, in one formulation of the Buddhist path, a very well-known formulation of the path, there's two stages of the path, which are dukkha and shraddha. Dukkha and shraddha. So dukkha is a wonderful Buddhist word that means everything that we experience as sort of negative or unsatisfactory in life. And it can mean a sort of vague dissatisfaction, or it can just mean that thing of, life never quite works, or it never quite works permanently. It might work for a bit and then things go slightly wrong. You get the job, you get the relationship, you get the place where you want to live, or you achieve this or you achieve that, but it doesn't, you never stay at that level of feeling like things are working perfectly. It always sort of disappoints on some level. That sort of nagging dissatisfaction, or it can mean intense suffering, an intense pain. It covers that whole gamut. But dukkha is really, really important in the Buddhist path. So our teacher, who's the founder of our order, Bhante Sangharakshita, he says you should cherish your dukkha. That's it's quite a counterintuitive way of looking at things, isn't it? But if there's no dukkha, then there's no path to enlightenment. And dukkha on the Buddhist path leads to shraddha. So that it's not only dukkha, it's not only suffering, but I don't know if you've had that sense of there's not only suffering, it's like there must be something else, and maybe even an intimation that there is something else. Like if you've been on retreat, those moments where you just feel like you have a glimpse of something that's of a slightly different order, or maybe even it's a moment where you realize something deeper about experience that is beyond trying to get what you want or beyond trying to engineer your life. There are all sorts of ways that can show up, but that's when you go from dukkha to shraddha. And I think that's encapsulated beautifully in this moment. Milarepa's desperate and he's racked with remorse, and he's thinking, what am I going to do? What's going to become of me? And then he hears the name of Marpa, and it sends him into this rapture, basically. It's beautiful. He has confidence, he has faith, and he knows that that's what he needs to do. He knows that that's what he needs to do is to find Marpa and become his student. When I heard this, it reminded me of when not long after I first came to the LBC. So I had a lot of dukkha in my life when I came here. I came here first in 2006, and I'd just been through a very painful relationship breakup. And I think I was coming to the LBC about 3 or 4 nights a week when I first came, because it was that somehow when I was in this shrine room, I felt fine. And I didn't feel fine. It's not true to say I didn't feel fine anywhere else. That's an exaggeration. But what I felt here was a sense of peace and serenity that wasn't present in my life at that time. I'd been through this painful relationship breakup. All sorts of bits of my life were tied up with that. And it was humiliating and, embarrassing and difficult. And I was in quite a difficult place when I came here. And I remember being on retreat. Actually, the winter retreat that Stiramanas was talking about. I was on the winter retreat 2006 to 2007. And it was led by Jnanavacha, who would become my teacher. He'd become, he ordained me and gave me my name, basically. But I didn't know him at that time. And he read a poem on that retreat, The Light of Asia by Edwin Arnold. And I just had this moment where, so beautiful, just tears were rolling down my cheeks. It was the life story of the Buddha. And something hit me really powerfully with it. And I had this experience of beauty and faith and confidence. And for me, that was a moment of dukkha to shraddha. And this is what Milarepa's experiencing here. So he knows he needs to find Marpa, and, well, what do you think happens next?
He's looking for him.
He goes looking for him. Go on, Daniel.
I think the story that ended with the first half was he was in a cave and
That's right.
friend, and
That's
then
right.
he went on to hide more.
Yeah, well, he goes looking for Marpa, and he finds him, and what do you think? When you come to the LBC, what's it like when you walk through the door? What happens? Anyone?
Felt a bit intimidating.
Oh, you felt a bit intimidated. That's good. Thanks, Daniel. Right. We can talk about that later. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's great, Daniel. Thank you. Yeah. Be honest. Anything else?
Nothing. You just come in.
You come in. Nothing happens. Yeah. Anyone else?
Everybody just allow you to come in. You just come in.
Yeah.
You
Everybody just
expect
allows you to
something,
come in. Yeah.
You expect maybe something.
Yeah.
But you just come in.
Oh, okay.
It's like.
Yeah.
You come into the room.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there might be beauty in it.
Right. Yeah.
Instead of
but you just come in.
over exaggeration or some scared or something, you just come in.
Good. Yeah. I think everyone probably has a slightly different experience, don't they? I remember the first time I came here. I remember the first person I met here. He's not around anymore. It was a guy called Surdek, and he was wearing a red Tibetan monastic style robe. He wasn't a monk. He just wore this kind of robe, and he had a skinhead, and he had a shitty garba, who is this Buddha figure there who goes down into the hell realms. Had him tattooed right the way down his arm, and he was just like, "Welcome," like that. And I just thought, this is fantastic. I'd loved it. I still remember the first person I met. He's really, really friendly. And I came in this shrine room, and it was full like it is tonight. And someone was giving this teaching, and I just looked around. I thought, this is wonderful. This is absolutely wonderful. But we make a point of trying to be friendly at the LBC, and we make a point of trying to welcome people. So you might think that that's what Marpa did with Milarepa, but no, definitely not. It wasn't like that at all. So Marpa said to him, so he found Marpa, and Marpa said to him, yeah, I'll take you as my student, but you'll have to do some work, basically. I'm not just going to give you the teachings just like that. So Milarepa had he was quite hell-bent on getting these teachings. He thought if he got these Buddhist teachings that he would be able to undo his dreadful past. And Marpa wasn't going to do that, basically. He said, you're going to have to do some work for me. So what he got him to do, and this is quite legendary in Milarepa's story, is he got him to build these towers. And first of all, he got him to build a tower facing in one direction. And Milarepa was doing this with his hands, so he was going and getting boulders and bricks and clay and other things that you use to build towers. I'm not a joiner, I don't know, a bricklayer, I don't know. But anyway, he got him to haul these stones and bricks and everything like that. And he got him to build a tower. And then he came back and he said, I didn't ask you to build that tower. And Milarepa was like, you totally did. And Marpa said, don't argue with me. Take it down. So he had to take it down and then he said, take it down and put all the stones back on the other side of the valley. So he does that. And then the next day, he comes back, or whenever it was, like a week later or whatever, and he says, okay, I've decided I'd like a triangular tower. So Milarepa builds him this triangular tower, and then Marpa comes back and says, oh, I didn't ask you to build me a triangular tower. What are you talking about? And so this goes on. He gets him to build a circular tower, and Marpa says to him, no, I must have been drunk when I asked you to do that. So he says, take the tower down, and I'd like a square one, and I'd like it to be 3 stories high. And so this goes on and on and on. And weirdly, Milarepa's confidence in Marpa isn't shaken, but it's really, really difficult for him because he's there for a long time at this point. And, Marpa keeps coming up with these things like, oh, I was drunk, or oh, I didn't mean it, or you shouldn't have listened to me, or that sort of thing. And Marpa really, really kind of puts him through the ringer. And by the end of this, Milarepa's absolutely desperate. And he's got kind of sores and welts on his back, apparently, from carrying the bricks. And there's, they're leaking pus and all of that sort of thing. And still, Marpa refuses to give him the teachings. So sorry to all of you that have just joined us from the intro course. You're slightly in at the deep end with this, aren't you? This is like sort of not Buddhism light, is it? But it's interesting. I think. What do you make of that? What do you think that has to say to us? Anybody got any thoughts on it?
Well, I think he's teaching him something already.
Mm-hmm. Okay, hold that thought. Let's see what anybody else has to say. If anybody else has got thoughts on it, I think you're right. He's trying to teach him something. Go on, Declan.
Maybe like the cyclical nature of the mundane experience.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe.
He's got to do it like the
Right.
do it again and again and again.
Yeah. So he's actually trying to teach him the Dharma through building towers. That's interesting. Yeah, thank you, Declan. Yeah, go on.
It's not, I kept on thinking, I don't know if for the people in the course, if they know that much about the uncle figure, but I just kept on thinking this must be really triggering because the uncle
Right.
told him to do stuff
Ah, right, okay.
and then treated him horribly.
Yeah.
So, but then I was like, what would the lesson in that be? And maybe he's facing his fears, he's facing something
Yeah.
that hurt him.
Yeah.
But also maybe seeing it from a different perspective.
Right.
as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's all very, very interesting, yeah. So I think all of that is very valid. I think I was saying to everyone who was here from the beginning of the evening, I think with all of this and with all storytelling and with all sort of Buddhist parables, you can't say it has this meaning or that meaning. It's much better to say, what meaning does it have, or what meaning does it have for you at this particular moment? Like all of these stories are infinite. It's like the life story of the Buddha. That, those of you that were on the course, You'll have heard the story about the Buddha, leaving home, going forth, finding his teachers, all that sort of thing. I must have heard that story hundreds of times. I must have taught it hundreds of times. There's always something new that you can discover in it. And I think, there's not one meaning here, but I think a bit of context is useful. And that is that Marpa is an enlightened guru, and he's in a sort of tradition of Buddhism called the Vajrayana. It's called the Vajrayana, which means the diamond thunderbolt way. And the emphasis of the Vajrayana was on gaining enlightenment in one lifetime. So it's all about intensity and not wasting time. And he's not interested in pandering to Milarepa. He's like, look, you've told me your story. You've come here. I know who you are. I know what you've done. If you want to practice with me, you need to take this really, really, really seriously. And he can see he's not yet ready for these teachings because he's got this kind of acquisitive attitude, basically. It's like, I just want the teachings, I just want the teachings. But what he's trying to do is sort of break him down and help him to let go of his previous life. And one way that he can do that is through service to Marpa. But the context is important. Knowing a little bit about the Vajrayana is important. And also, Vajrayana teachers, or, sort of tantric gurus, they're not interested in your sort of excuses. I can't read my notes here. Yeah, they're not interested in your nonsense. That's it. And they won't indulge you. So it's interesting. There's a teacher called Chogyam Trungpa. Some of you might have heard of Chogyam Trungpa. He's not so much talked about these days, but he came to the West at about the same time as Sangharakshita, our teacher, came to the West. And he's in this lineage, basically. He was a Vajrayana teacher. And I find him quite inspiring. And he was definitely fitted that mould of the sort of tantric teacher. My favourite story about Chogyam Trungpa was that he was at a big event, like a conference one time on Buddhism, and the people in the audience were asking questions. And this guy stood up and... shall I say? Yeah, between you and me, sometimes you get this. You say, like, has anybody got any questions? And people, they don't really ask questions. They just want to sound intellectual and knowledgeable. So they sort of talk a lot and make, reference to Buddhism and so on. Or sometimes not even that. And anyway, this guy stood up and he started spouting all of this sort of, like, philosophical stuff that was kind of not even really dressed up as a question. And Chogyam Trungpa apparently just leant into the microphone and started going until the guy stopped talking. and then he sat back, and the guy was obviously like quite shocked. And then he started speaking again, and Chogyam Trungpa again just went like that. And he just did it until the guy stopped talking. So watch out when you ask questions. But I think that's really good. I don't know. There's something about that I like. I mean, that's not how we do things at the LBC. You'll be glad to know. Anyway, the other thing about the Vajrayana as well is it's very much about the personal relationship between the guru and disciple. So all of the teaching will be in the context of a close relationship between the guru and the disciple, and the guru gets to know the disciple very, very well. So it's almost like the opposite of what we have these days. Nowadays, people come to Buddhism often. They learn to meditate through using apps. They look at teachings online and so on, and there's often no student-teacher relationship for a long time, if ever. And the Vajrayana is saying, no, that's not possible. You can't learn Buddhism in that way, basically. And I would agree with that. But the thing about Marpa is he loves Milarepa. He really loves him right from the start. To his wife, in secret, his wife's like saying, look, please just give him it's the whole way through the story. It's interesting. There's Marpa's wife is there. Sometimes she gets called Mrs. Marpa, which she makes her sound like a TV detective from the 70s. But sometimes she's called Mrs. Marpa and sometimes she's called Demima. Anyway, his wife Demima sort of says to her, look, will you not take pity on Milarepa? And he says, look, he's my most beloved student, he's my most promising student. Sometimes it brings tears to his eyes to have to do this to Milarepa, but he does, and he knows that it's the best thing for him, basically. So he knows that Milarepa's not ready to receive the teachings, and this is shown in an episode where Milarepa gets so kind of disgruntled at a certain point that Marpa's wife gives him some offerings to take to another guru in a nearby valley, and she says, look, go off, take these offerings to him and you'll get the teachings from this other teacher, because it's obviously not happening with Marpa. So he goes off and he makes offerings to this other teacher. But of course, the offerings that he makes are essentially stolen from Marpa. Even if they've been given by Marpa's wife, they're not really his to take. So he goes off and he gets these teachings from the other guru, and he gets these meditation practices, but nothing happens. He can't meditate. His mind's completely restless. And that's, of course, because he's been unethical in the way he's approached the teachings, and he's not quite ready yet. So he needs to sort of work through his difficulties. He needs to sort of work through his past, really, before he's actually ready to take on anything new. Okay. So, yeah, you could say that, I think as somebody said here, it's almost like he's, what's he doing? It's like he's doing a sort of preliminary training with Marpa, basically. And Marpa does give him the teachings eventually, but he knows that he's not ready to receive them. And he has to go through a period of showing that he can let go of his past and that he's ready to take on the commitment of having a teacher. And this is very traditional. So, traditionally, like say, for example, in the Zen tradition, if you want to join the monastery, if you want to make that commitment, they don't just let you in. You have to kneel outside in the snow for 3 days. And if you want to make that commitment, you have to show that you're ready to do that. And you have to kneel outside in the snow if it's snowing, maybe in the heat if it's hot. And you have to do that for a few days, basically. Imagine if we did that at the LBC. It'd be terrible, wouldn't it? You'd have all these people sort of kneeling outside in the rain in Bethnal Green and that sort of thing. But thankfully, we don't get you to do that. But for us, there is a path of practice. So when you first come along, there's no particular commitment, and you're free to just come along to classes and so on. But if you want to get more involved, in a sense, there is still a sort of a path of service here. You get involved, you can help out at the centre, you go on retreats, you cook on retreats, you help out, it's about co-creating the community rather than just being a sort of passive participant in it. So if you've been coming along for some time and you want to get more involved, that's a recognition of a way that you can do that, basically. It's quite a poignant evening for me this evening because this is my last night on the Monday night team. So I've been helping out on this team since I first came along to the LBC. And this is my last night this evening. And maybe I'll say a little bit more about that later. Maybe I won't. I don't know. But that's what I did from when I first came along, basically, was I just joined the team here and made tea and hoovered and washed up. And that doesn't feel like that. It's just been a joy to do that, really. So definitely not building towers and having to dismantle them. But I don't know, there's something about the value of uncomplicatedly just sort of helping out and what can happen. I think sometimes what happens is we sort of think that Buddhism is about the teachings. A bit like Milarepa was when he first went to Marpa. we think that if we just get the right teaching, or if we hear the right teaching, that will be what we need. But actually, this is a path of practice, and yes, that practice is meditating, and that practice definitely is going on retreat regularly, but the path is also building Sangha and helping each other to practice by creating a positive environment. And that's what we're trying to do here. That's what I've been doing for all these years, helping out on a Monday, is not even necessarily doing jobs, but just creating a welcoming atmosphere for people to come into. That's in a way is kind of its own parallel. It's interesting. I was reflecting on this a little bit. Is everybody warm, by the way? Is it getting a bit warm? Yeah. Is anyone from the team able to make it a bit cooler? Yeah, I'm just noticing that it's heating up a bit. You can notice that because obviously you can only see me, but I can see all of you. And you notice people slowly starting to go like this, So let's pause for a moment and just make it a bit cooler. Yeah, I was going to say the other thing about this story as well is that I think the dominant narrative in our culture is that it's a thing, isn't it, of like if it feels good, do it, and if it feels good, it must be good, and vice versa. People know what I mean? And then if it's the opposite, if it feels difficult or it feels challenging, then it can't be good. So you could look at Milarepa's story and think, how on earth did he do that? How on earth did he persevere with that? But he had this strong sense of faith and confidence, or shraddha, that he knew that it was actually worth going through this trial or this tribulation, partly because of his past, but partly because he saw something that was such incredible value and beauty in Marpa. And I think that's a really interesting lesson, because that thing, it's just not true of, I think anything really worthwhile doing in life is going to be, it's going to have an element of challenge in it, isn't it? There are going to be ups and downs in it, Like I've been practicing Buddhism for a long time, and mostly it's just been a really easy, joyful path. But when you practice Buddhism, you're constantly stepping into the unknown, and you're constantly coming up against new frontiers and new territory in your heart and mind. And sometimes it's quite challenging because it involves letting go of views that you might have held dear for a long time, or letting go of perspectives that you had that aren't working anymore. The Buddha's vision is one where we get to a place where we completely let go of that and we completely go beyond that. But that is not going to be without challenge. And in a way, like if you really think about it, then that's the way it has to be, and that's the way it should be. And I think we can see that a little bit in Milarepa's story and his relationship with Marpa. I was thinking about this in relation to my own story. So I was talking about Jnanavacha, who some of you might have met on the urban retreat. He used to be on this team, he used to teach on a Monday evening, and I was on that winter retreat, and then we met and we became friends. I got to know him very well. He eventually ordained me, gave me my name. So he's kind of like my main teacher in Triratna. And those of you that know him, there's a lot of lightness and laughter and play. And my path with him was pretty much nothing like the path with Marpa. It mainly consisted of going to galleries and eating cake, which is not as big a trial as that. But there is something about being friends with somebody who is that wise that is actually quite challenging, and in a way has an echo of Milarepa's relationship with Marpa, that that actually you can only be completely honest, or that person sees through your stories or your justifications or whatever it is. And that's held with a lot of affection and a lot of love, but even that can be slightly challenging. There was one time when I was talking to him, and this sticks out in my mind, about just this thing of the sort of lightness and play and the challenge. I'd just been ordained, and I was thinking about we were thinking about the possibility of marriage, me and my partner. And I talked to Jnanavatra about all my major life decisions. And but I just made this commitment of being ordained. So it was like one big commitment in my life. So you might want to give a bit of space to making another big commitment. Anyway, I spoke to him about it, and he was like, "Yeah, I think that's fine, isn't it? That would be fine." And we were in the Tate, we were in the cafe at the Tate Britain at the time. And then anyway, we were having coffee, and he got up to get some cake and more coffee, and he said, "What cake would you like?" And I said, "Oh, I'm actually trying to go sugar-free at the moment." And he said, "What? I can't believe this. Like, marriage I can understand, but this is an abomination." Anyway, so all of that is to say that in Milarepa's case, in his relationship with Marpa, which was a very, very loving relationship, and in our community here, the path is entirely in the context of friendship. That is, the Buddha described the spiritual life. He described friendship as the whole of the spiritual life. And as in Milarepa's case, he needed to open up to the spiritual influence of somebody who is wiser than he is. And that's what we need to do. We need to be in relationship with each other, and part of that is we need to open up to the spiritual influence of people that are wiser than us. So that will mean the Buddha, in the ultimate sense, really trying to understand the Buddha's vision, which is one of that it's possible for us to totally transform beyond what we can even recognize. But also, we need to be around people who are just a little bit wiser than us, or who are a little bit further on the path than us. And that's what we talk of as spiritual friendship. Getting to know people that are a bit more experienced than us, it has an effect on us whereby we'll change over the years, basically, when we're in a friendship like that. So all of this is in the context of friendship. And that doesn't mean losing your critical faculty, and it doesn't mean not questioning things, and it doesn't mean just sort of unequivocally surrendering, but it does mean opening up to the influence of somebody who is wiser than you. Okay, so I'm going to start to wrap up now, and I'm going to start to conclude. I've struggled a bit with this, to be honest, because I've known that this is going to be the last talk I give at Dharma Night. The thing is, I know for most of you, you've not been coming along here very long, so it's not really a thing for most of you. You're like, oh, there's that middle-aged guy that makes weird cultural references so often. I've seen him teach a couple of times. But I've been doing this for a long time, so for me I was quite emotional today, and I was thinking, I'd like to say something at the end that really makes sense. And I couldn't think of anything. So I am going to conclude. And what I would say is Milarepa's story, I find it so inspiring because it's a fantastical story. It's an extreme story. But his story of his early years, and then he finds Marpa, eventually he moves on from Marpa, actually, and he goes and he spends years meditating in caves. He eventually has his own students and his own disciples. He becomes this enlightened teacher who's very, very beloved by so many people, and beloved in the Tibetan tradition, and a very, very positive influence on so many people, including me. But I think his life is an incredible example of it doesn't matter where you've come from. It doesn't matter what your history is. It doesn't matter what you've done. The Buddha's message is clear. anything can be transformed. Absolutely anything can be transformed. And that's what Milarepa's story tells us. And he shows that throughout his life, basically. Absolutely anything can be transformed. And yeah, as I've said, that might not always be easy. My experience of the Buddhist path is that it's mostly very, very joyful. But if you stick with it, and you need to stick with it in order to really see or begin to see what it's about, it's not always going to be easy. And if it's not easy, it doesn't mean something is wrong. I think that's the point that I want to make. That thing that I talked about, where it's like, like if it feels good, do it, and therefore it must be good, and if it doesn't feel good, it can't be good. That's just nonsense. It doesn't mean if something's not easy that it's wrong. It probably means you're making progress, and that won't last. But bumps and rocks in the road will always come along. And I think Milarepa is this incredible, inspiring example of somebody who just persevered through all that difficulty and eventually became enlightened. And so it's traditional. Well, I'm going to wrap up in a moment, and I thought what we could do is finish this evening by we'll do a mantra, we'll do the Milarepa mantra. And if you want to, during that, you can come up and make offerings. And maybe just take in the image of that's on the shrine there. And when you make an offering, it's basically like offering up an aspiration, or maybe you're expressing gratitude for the path or gratitude for something you've received. And you can come up and do that. And if you're new, if you've been on the intro course, don't worry about doing it wrong. You can just come up and offer a nightlight or incense and just put it here. But it's traditional when a teacher leaves that they give their heart teaching, or they give their sort of pith teaching, which is a profound teaching from them to the people that they're leaving behind. And I thought about this quite a bit. So Milarepa went on, and he had a student called Rachungpa. And Rachungpa's final teaching to his students was that he showed his bottom and then ran off, which I'm not going to do this evening. So I decided not to do that, but I will just leave you with a few small things, and that is, I can't believe what a beautiful path of joy and love and beauty this is. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been teaching on this team for a long time, and it's been so wonderful, and this path is so wonderful, and this community is so wonderful. It's not perfect, but it is wonderful. And my heart advice to you is just, if something has moved you when you come here, just keep coming along. And if things get challenging or difficult, just keep coming along. Keep engaging, go on retreat, and make friends. That's my heart advice to you. Okay, so there we are. I'll leave that there.